Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and we're going to be doing part 3 of the lecture from Neil Ferguson. But before we do that, I want to play something from DW. It's dealing with the membership with NATO. So let's start with that. Just a reminder, please make sure that you subscribe to all my channels. I have 3 channels on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. The links for that are in the description of this video and all my videos. So please click those links and subscribe to all 6 channels. I am heavily censored on YouTube, so I can't keep some videos up. And in addition, some people that do comment on videos or YouTube, YouTube seems to be censoring you. So I apologize for that. It's rare that I'll censor someone. I'll censor them for a couple of reasons. Either they're being belligerent or they are writing something that potentially could create a strike on the channel. So I will delete those comments, but those are rare cases. So if you're not seeing something that you post, it's most likely something that you wrote that YouTube is censoring. Just be discerning. If you think that something is important to say and that it might be censored by YouTube, make sure that you go to the Rumble, Bitchute, or Brighteon channels and go to those videos and comment there.
And we start in Brussels, where a flag-raising ceremony to formally mark Sweden's accession to NATO is currently underway. The event is being held at the Alliance's headquarters after Sweden officially became its 32nd member in Washington. That's 2 years after the Nordic country applied to join the military alliance following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In a few moments, we'll take a look at what Sweden brings to NATO. But first, let's hear from the Swedish Prime Minister speaking in Brussels in the last hour.
The security situation in our region has not been this serious since the Second World War, and Russia will stay a threat to Euro-Atlantic security for a foreseeable future. It was in this light Sweden applied to join the NATO Defence Alliance to gain security, but also to provide security.
Given Sweden's location, military power, and experience in dealing with Russian aggression, its accession to NATO is widely seen as a blow to the Kremlin. We've been taking a look at what the country adds to the transatlantic alliance as it looks to bolster its defenses against a potential Russian attack.
Sweden becomes the second Nordic nation in the past year to join NATO, and its membership brings with it a number of advantages for the alliance.
Why does anyone wear ponchos if they never actually work? All you need is the bearskin waterproof tactical jacket to...
Firstly, by following Finland in abandoning neutrality, Sweden is sending an important message to those nations still on the fence about the invasion of Ukraine. It's time to pick a side.
Sweden is now leaving 200 years of neutrality and non-alignment behind. It's a big step. We must take that seriously. But it's also a very natural step that we're taking.
Furthermore, the Kremlin can no longer claim Finland's accession was an isolated incident. As NATO seeks to develop defence plans for Eastern members aimed at deterring Russia's advance, Sweden brings considerable experience in understanding how to counter that threat. Sweden's military capability also makes it a powerful new member. The nation boasts cutting-edge aircraft and anti-aircraft missiles, as well as state-of-the-art tanks and submarines, and a considerable fleet of ships.
Sweden brings a 500-year-old navy, and a navy that is among the largest in the Baltic Sea, where we should remember NATO doesn't have very many large navies.
Sweden's geographical position also makes it useful. Firstly, as a land transit route to reinforce fellow members Norway and Finland, and secondly, by allowing NATO to take control of the Baltic Sea in any conflict with Russia via Sweden's enormous coastline. In return, Sweden now has security guarantees from NATO member states should it come under attack from Russia or anyone else in future. The message from Russia's opponents is clear. Both NATO and Sweden are far stronger as a result of this agreement.
For 8 seconds.
And joining us for more on this from NATO headquarters in Brussels is our correspondent, Terry Schulz. Terry, what's the sense there at NATO headquarters today? Are people uncorking the champagne after what's been a rather rocky process at times over the past 2 years?
Not quite yet, because the flag raising is underway, but I'm certain there will be plenty of bottles uncorked after, as you say, this very long 2 years, and especially even this last year when Finland was admitted to the alliance, having gotten all the approvals from all the other allies a year ago. That left Sweden in a position where it felt very vulnerable, almost like it had a target on it. There was new member Finland on one side and Norway on the other side, but Sweden was not in. And so there's a huge sense of relief here around NATO headquarters. Both Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg were clearly happy, even laughing a little bit. And you don't see that very often here at NATO. So everyone is really in a good mood that this process finally has come to an end with the raising of the Swedish flag here.
Now, we heard a moment ago from the Swedish Prime Minister, and he said the Russian threat to Euro-Atlantic security tipped the scales for Sweden to join NATO, and that breaks with a long tradition of neutrality. Why does Sweden think joining NATO is a safer bet than staying neutral?
Well, one of the points he made this morning, and we know this also from NATO's change in its military posture, is that they don't believe this threat from Russia is going away anytime soon. Not only will the war in Ukraine not be over quickly, but then Russia will turn to other neighbors, perhaps. And that's, of course, if you're in the Baltic states or you're in the Nordic area, you feel like you could be next. Now, the Swedish defense minister, who we've spoken to many times on our air, used to say, without Article 5, without being a NATO member, we can hope, we can wish, we can even assume that other countries would come to defend us, but we cannot know.
I think it's very important to take a look at the metaphysics of this and the Kabbalistic significance of 32. Sweden becomes the 32nd nation to join NATO alliance. 32 is a powerful Kabbalistic number. And it's a number of completion in some circles of Kabbalah. So I'm concerned about that this is launching something a little bit more permanent and energetic.
Only know once we have Article 5, and that's what NATO membership gives Sweden.
Now, what do Sweden and Finland on the other side bring to the table in terms of dealing with a potential Russian military threat?
With ministers and political
well, these countries are both very much security providers, and Prime Minister Kristersson made that point again this morning. They aren't necessarily going to be the target of a Russian attack. That would more likely be the Baltic states or Poland, which are they're around normally a target of Russia's provocative remarks. But remember that these countries planned, perhaps for perpetuity, to defend themselves alone. And so they built up their militaries. They have huge stockpiles. They have extremely well-trained troops. They have high levels of recruitment. Finland kept conscription. So they are bringing very, very strong militaries into the alliance. And frankly, as soon as they decided they wanted to join, many other countries said, great, we're going to learn from Finland and Sweden how to be resilient, how to be self-sufficient, how to keep extraordinarily good discipline in our ranks. And so everyone is very much looking forward to the day now when that northern flank is sealed and you've got Finland and Sweden firmly under the NATO umbrella.
PW's Brussels correspondent Terry Schulz there, reporting from NATO headquarters. Thank you very much, Terry. One of the most pressing issues facing NATO members is, of course, the war in Ukraine and Kyiv's repeated pleas for more arms. For Germany, that debate is now focused on a British proposal to swap cruise missiles. It would see Germany give its Taurus missiles to Britain who would in turn send Ukraine more of its own Storm Shadow missiles. Germany's Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock, has said she is open to the idea, but Chancellor Olaf Scholz has so far blocked any decision to send the long-range weapons to Kyiv. He's concerned that they could be used to hit targets in Russia, and also that German soldiers would need to be involved in firing them. DW's chief political editor told us more about why we're hearing mixed messages from the German government on the Taurus missiles.
Because there are very mixed takes on whether to supply this cruise missile. It's an open secret that Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock, who described sending them to Britain, who could then send its missiles to Ukraine, would be an option. She was in favor of sending them straight away. And the German Chancellor is completely set against Germany supplying any such weapons, particularly this Taurus system, which is seen as pretty much the best of its kind of make in the world, because he's concerned, first of all, over German soldiers potentially being involved in the targeting of this, and secondly, that these missiles have a range that if they were launched from a particular part of Ukraine, they could hit Moscow. So the overarching concern in the Chancellery is that Germany could be seen as a party to this conflict, something German Chancellor Scholz wants to avoid at all cost.
DW's chief political editor, Michaela Küfner there.
Well, we're seeing an uptick in activity in the European theater in this new Cold War 2.0, and there's a higher probability that it's only going to get worse and not better. So with that, please make sure that you subscribe to my channels. I'm going to be playing part 3 of the lecture series. There's going to be 4 parts to this for Niall Ferguson or Neil Ferguson. And please, if you could help support my work by donating, you can go to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. You can donate through PayPal, Stripe, or Buy Me a Coffee. The links are on the homepage at the very bottom of the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. I greatly appreciate your support. You can also be a paid subscriber at different tier levels on Patreon. There is tier 1 where you're just supporting my news coverage. Tier 2, you're supporting my news coverage and getting 2 lectures from each medical module that I publish. And tier 3 will get half the lectures of a medical module. And tier 4 will get all the videos for a medical module that I release. To get the PDFs also, you would have to purchase the full module on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I've published the pulmonology module. There's 22 lectures with PDFs and a video that accompanies each section. I go over many different topics on pulmonology. You will learn a lot. You will challenge your mind, and you will be able to reduce that power imbalance between you and your physician. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and purchase that module, or be a paid subscriber at higher tier levels on Patreon.
To liberty, which we see on contemporary American campuses, not only American campuses. And I'm going to, as Shiloh implied, talk about the solutions that we are trying to develop at the University of Austin. And you'll see, I hope, the connections from what I said yesterday to what I'm going to say this afternoon in the sense that there is a constitutional dimension to both problems, to the problem of the threat to liberal democracy and the problem of the threat to academic freedom. I began with Adam Ferguson yesterday, and I want to begin with Friedrich von Hayek today. I only realized recently that Hayek was the second cousin of Wittgenstein, which impresses me very much. Like all good products of Germanic academia, he had not one but two doctorates, so Herr Dr. Professor von Hayek would have been the correct form of address if you'd run across him in his early years at the University of Vienna. It was at the London School of Economics between 1931 and 1950 that he wrote the famous tract, The Road to Serfdom. The interesting thing about Hayek was that he was also a founder. And he founded an extraordinarily important institution, the Mont Pelerin Society, in 1947. A society designed to maintain the tradition of classical economics in the face of the collectivist tide that Hayek saw all around in the 1940s. I have a special debt to the Mont Pelerin Society, which is that I met my wife there. And not many people can claim to have met their wife at the Mont Pelerin Society. It's especially remarkable since nearly all the members of the Mont Pelerin Society are very aged Chicago school economists. Of course, the University of Chicago played a part in Hayek's career. He was at the Committee of Social Thought, and it was there that he wrote the monumental Constitution of Liberty, to which my title, of course, alludes. He returned in later life to the German-speaking world in Freiburg, unhappily at Salzburg. He was awarded the Nobel in 1974, but he was far more gratified when he became a companion of honor 10 years later. The Queen and he hit it off extremely well. He also awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom the year before he died. I'm telling you all this to encourage you to read, if you haven't read, the Constitution of Liberty, a foundational work. Margaret Thatcher used to pull it out of her handbag and brandish it and say, "This is what we believe." And she had come to Hayek quite late in life under the encouragement of think tanks like the Center for Policy Studies, of which I'm a trustee in the Institute of Economic Affairs. If you read all the way to the end of the Constitution of Liberty, which I suspect not many of you have, you come to a chapter that deals with academic life. And in it, Hayek, as he often did, fails to foresee the future. He writes, "Nowhere is freedom more important than where our ignorance is greatest, at the boundaries of knowledge. In other words, when nobody can predict what lies a step ahead." We so often forget today that intellectual freedom rests on a much wider foundation of freedom and cannot exist without it. But the ultimate aim of freedom is the enlargement of those capacities in which man surpasses his ancestors, and to which each generation must endeavor to add its share in the growth of knowledge and the gradual advance of moral and aesthetic beliefs, where no superior must be allowed to enforce one set of views of what is right or good, and where only further experience can decide what should prevail. Wise and timeless words. But Hayek, writing in the late 50s and publishing in 1960, feared a quite different threat to academic liberty than the one that has emerged. Hayek feared that the craze for bureaucratization and rationalization that characterized in particular the American academy in the 1950s would create a kind of corporate structure in academic life that would threaten individual freedom of thought and that the only places where the individual would be free to think would be the ancient and long-established universities. His argument was that the old universities, devoted to research and teaching at the boundaries of knowledge, would remain preeminent in advancing knowledge precisely because, quote, only such institutions can offer that freedom and the choice of problems and those contacts between representatives of the different disciplines that provide the best conditions for conception and pursuit of new ideas. And like a fool, I believed him. I believed that the ancient universities on both sides of the Atlantic would be the places that would most revere the individual's freedom to think. And I was wrong. I did not foresee, as a reader of Hayek in Oxford in the 1980s, trigger warnings and safe spaces and deferred pronouns and checked privileges and microaggressions. If you had told me then there will be less free speech on university campuses than in saloon bars in America by the 2020s, I would not have believed you. I would not have foreseen, and I did not foresee universities flouting such fundamental liberal principles as due process and the First Amendment. I did not anticipate that so-called liberal faculty members would support such things. I did not foresee the near extinction of conservative professors to the point that conservative professor would become an oxymoron. I did not foresee an army of administrators enforcing this illiberal turn at ancient universities. I did not imagine university presidents never punishing bad behavior, even rewarding it. And I certainly didn't foresee that the victims of this illiberal turn would be colleagues and friends like Sam Abrahams, Nigel Biggar, Peter Boghossian, Noah Carl, Erica Christakis, Roland Fryer, Bruce Gilley, Jason Hill, David Kane, Joshua Katz, Eric Kaufman, Jordan Peterson, Catherine Stott, Ron Sullivan, Amy Wax, Brett Weinstein. I could go on. I'm proud to call at least some of these people my friends. And I'm happy to say that I'm staying with Joshua and Solveig Katz. And I want to say on the record here on the Princeton campus that I believe the way that Joshua Katz has been treated by this university is an utter disgrace and is a stain on the reputation of Princeton that will have to be one day effaced, and may that day come soon. Tomorrow,
we need in academia professors and students that are of definitely the conservative persuasion, stepping up to the plate and pushing back on this woke agenda that's at the universities. It's not just at the elite universities like the Ivy League in the United States, but also at the state school level. And it's trickling down into the private schools and even in the grade schools, the public grade schools. There's a new kind of cultural revolution that's taking place. It's an American version of what happened during Mao in China. So there's kind of this takeover, and individuals and the professorship needs to step up and push back. Now, this, not just wokeism, but towing the party line or the dogma of a particular profession is also a problem. And that individuals that start asking questions about perhaps the perspective is wrong, perhaps new ideas need to flourish, questions need to be asked about this integration of some of the scientific discoveries and the national security state needs to happen. We need to start asking questions. we need to start asking, why is this happening? Instead of having publications censoring certain types of researchers or universities censoring certain types of researchers. And we saw this especially when people were asking serious questions during the crisis. So when the national security state starts to integrate into the universities now are captured and have to toe a certain line. So this problem, it goes beyond wokeism. It's also a problem where there's newspeak, where if you don't speak correctly, you will be a pariah of society or of your discipline, of your guild that you're from. So we need more people stepping up to the plate and being trailblazers and being contrarians, so we can get to, the truth of the matter.
The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, Greg Lukianoff's excellent society, will publish the latest data on campus deplatforming. Deplatforming is one of the many ugly words we've had to learn in recent years. They define it as the successful censorship of or the attempt to censor campus events open to the public. It can include disinviting speakers, cancelling performances, taking down art exhibits, or preventing the showing of a film. It can include censorship or attempts at censorship that occurred either before or during an event, though not those that occurred after an event.
This is also happening with the university reaching out to certain students or professors that are pushing certain types of political buttons or, during the crisis, scientific buttons, that they go out, these universities are going after the professors, the associate professors, or sometimes the students. I saw this firsthand by two different universities during the crisis. And this is something that needs to be looked into, investigated, and the schools need to be held accountable.
This was an almost unknown occurrence as recently as the late 1990s. It began to occur with increasing frequency in the 2000s. And if you thought that it had died down in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, you were wrong, because it hit last year a new record high. I'm grateful to Greg Lukianoff and his colleagues for giving me this chart just ahead of its publication, because if you thought that we passed peak woke, this chart should convince you otherwise. The Heterodox Academy that Jonathan Haidt founded a few years ago published its most recent report last year. 59% of students in the survey that covers colleges across the United States reported being reluctant to discuss at least one of 5 controversial topics they were asked about. Slightly more than 62% of students in the survey said that the reason for their reluctance to discuss controversial topics was, quote, that other students would make critical comments with each other after class. The same proportion, slightly higher, 63% of students agreed that the climate on their campus prevented people from saying things they believed because others might find those views offensive. And it's quite interesting to drill down into the data in the survey I've just cited, because you can see all the reasons why a student in America today would be hesitant to share their views in class. The highest proportion worried about other students' critical comments, but you can see there are all kinds of reasons not to speak up in class. Someone would post critical comments on social media. The professor would criticize my views as offensive. The professor would say my views are wrong. The professor would give me a lower grade because of my views, and so on. Let's talk about Princeton, shall we? After all, we're here. FIRE surveys all the colleges. And here are the Princeton findings from the most recent FIRE survey. 70% of Princeton students say shouting down a speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus is at least rarely acceptable. 45% say they've self-censored on campus at least once or twice a month. 63% say they're worried about damaging their reputation because someone misunderstands something they've said or done. There is a ratio of 6 to 1, liberal to conservative students. In the FIRE rankings, Princeton is somewhat ignominious 187th.
Now, keep in mind, we are seeing this happening in real time on X, formerly Twitter, where if someone is disagreeing with, let's say, their perspective on the crisis, they will try to shout down that tweet, with, rhetoric. This is what I call the infestation of social media. And, you see it playing out in real time, where during the crisis, you have the anti-inoculators. I want to keep this video up on YouTube, so I'm using certain words. And you also have the problem with pathogen deniers, right? And both sides are like fighting each other, not really paying attention to the national security state and what actually just happened in the last 4 years, and how that national security state is still operating, and in many ways operating with more vigor than they did in 2019. So because of all this trying to drown out the opponent about what happened in the crisis, the perpetrators, the national security state, and that connection between government and the biological military industrial complex is still up and running, and we haven't really solved the problem. So the infestation on the social media, it's only made it worse. It hasn't solved the problem, the root cause, getting to the root cause and stopping it. It's only created a division and a smokescreen so the national security state can continue on. And people just keep on playing into it. Some of them are intelligent individuals that are, doing it, and others are not so intelligent. So the spectrum of intelligence in the infestation runs the gambit. But, what Niall is saying about what's going on the university campuses, let me read this. 70% of the students say shouting down a speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus is at least rarely accepted. 45% is rarely acceptable. 45% of the students say that they have self-censored on campus at least once or twice a month. 63% of the students say that they are worried about damaging their reputation because someone misunderstands something that they have said or done. See, there's this infestation that's in social media now, trying to attack people. And, I've seen it myself, people saying things that are just not true, and trying to demonize someone's perspective because it goes against their narrative or against their worldview. That's wrong. And usually these individuals don't have their facts straight. But there is this problem that is starting to rise, where their social discourse is starting to erode, and it's turning into just social shouting. It's just noise. It's a cacophony. It's meaningless now. So, keep that in mind. You see people growing their X channel, demonizing people. This is just clickbait, and unfortunately, they get viewership because people want Jerry Springer. People are looking for a Jerry Springer life. They want to be entertained. It's bread and circus. It's not about solving problems. It's not about getting to the root cause and making sure that we have peace, prosperity, and a lasting future of constitutional rights. And there's a lot of people that are just talking and not a lot of thinking. This is why I think in a series of videos that I've been doing, in the series, the New Yorker, where I'm watching the video with you and giving you my opinion on it. You may differ on my opinion. That's okay. All right. You may have a different perspective. Maybe I would be able to learn from your perspective. Maybe you could learn from my perspective. But I think the sense of watching the video with me gives you an opportunity to let some of the facts and the perspectives to sink in. And then maybe you will learn from it. There are too many people that are on YouTube or even on Rumble and on Brighteon and Bitchute that are just a lot of talk, a lot of fear mongering, and not really trying to solve the problems. And let's face it, majority of these podcasters, they're not well read, nor are they well lettered.
Out of 248, I will point out that in pole position, if that's the right expression, at number 248 is Harvard. That might make you feel slightly better. Now, it's quite interesting to make some comparisons in this context, because these are really very startling findings. So I took a look at the raw data today. And so when Princeton undergraduates are asked, would you be publicly disagreeing with a professor about a controversial political topic, 41% would be somewhat uncomfortable and 29% very uncomfortable. How would you be expressing your views on a controversial topic in class? 35% somewhat uncomfortable, 18% very uncomfortable. How about expressing an unpopular political opinion to your fellow students on a social media account tied to your name? 31% somewhat uncomfortable, 42% very uncomfortable. How acceptable would you say it was for students to shout down a speaker to prevent them from speaking on campus? 33% sometimes, 7% always. Should your school allow a speaker who previously expressed the view that Black Lives Matter is a hate group? 37% definitely should not. 33% probably should not. How about a speaker who previously expressed the view that structural racism maintains inequality by protecting white privilege? Well, only 4% would definitely prohibit that speaker, and 9% probably not. Now, you might say to yourself, as sometimes people do, well, this is all very terrible, but there's always Chicago. Because Chicago has its principles, and it has its commitment to free speech, which dates back to its very foundation. Well, here's the rub. Because if you look at the Chicago data in the FIRE survey, they're really not very different. In fact, in some ways, they're worse. They feel just as uncomfortable, if not very uncomfortable, publicly disagreeing with the professor or expressing their views on a controversial topic in class. They're just as reluctant to be associated with an unpopular political opinion on social media. They're a little less inclined to shout down speakers, credit where it's due. But it seems to me there isn't a profound difference between Chicago and Princeton when it comes to the fundamental question: can you say what you think on campus? If you line up the data for Princeton and Chicago, as I've done in these charts, you are, I think, going to be more struck by the similarities than by the differences. One of the most extraordinary things about our time, which I did not foresee when I was a naive undergraduate in the 1980s, is the illiberalism of the liberals. So the Challey Institute a couple of years ago did some very interesting surveys. And they asked students and got them to identify themselves politically as to whether they were liberal or liberal-leaning, conservative or conservative-leaning, or independent or apolitical. And when they asked them questions like these, there's a very striking difference between what the liberals say and what the conservatives say. If many students disagree with the views of someone who's been invited to speak on campus, should the university withdraw the invitation? 39% of liberal and liberal-leaning students say yes, and only 17% of conservative students.
So those facts show that the liberal students are not open-minded. They're not willing to have a debate, or they're not willing to have the other side speak. That's exactly the problem that took place during Mao in China, during the Cultural Revolution.
Required reading for a college class includes content that makes students feel uncomfortable. Should that reading be dropped as a requirement? 42% of the liberals say yes, only half that share of the conservatives do. And this is, again, a sample that extends across multiple institutions, 71 in total, 4-year undergraduate programs. If a professor says something that students find offensive, should that professor be reported to the university? I won't poll the room, but you will be surprised, or perhaps not, to find that 85% of liberal or liberal-leaning students think yes, the professor should immediately be reported to the university. What about if a student says something that other students find offensive? Should that student be reported to the university? Oh, 76%. 3/4 of liberal and liberal-leaning students think yes, they should report their classmates to the university. These are shocking findings. I find them disgusting. It would be nice to believe that it was an equal opportunity activity, deplatforming, but it's not. Oddly enough, it has become far more common that deplatforming initiatives come from the left than from the right, which is not to say that they don't also come from the right. One of the more depressing aspects of the last 12 months or so is the realization that some conservatives have concluded that if you can't beat them, join them, and the only way to fight fire is with fire, no pun intended. And so we see a shift towards these tactics amongst conservatives. This again is a dispiriting chart if you thought peak woke was in the rearview mirror. Have the classes and other academic activities you've participated in during college changed your view of the United States? 55% of liberals say, yes, it's made me more negative in my view of the United States. Only 32% of conservatives do. The most surprising thing the thing I never anticipated as I embarked on an academic career is that these impulses should lead to persecution. The data here, which I need to update, document scholars under fire. This is more fire data, looking at the different targets of the various sanctions to which one can be subjected. You can see the upward trend. Interestingly, scholars are most often targeted for expressing views on race, followed by partisanship, gender, and so on. And it's noticeable that undergraduates are most likely to be targeted. You can see that. Perhaps I should say a lot of undergraduates are targeted because there are a lot of undergraduates. That would be more correct. If one expressed these as percentages, I think the result would be quite different. Over 2/3 of targeting incidents in the FAR database result in some form of sanction. And these can include termination, even in cases of tenured faculty. So this is the reality of academic life in America in our time.
I'd like to do just a quick plug for the store. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I have. I have structural nano silver liquid. It's the first pillar in the anti-aging protocol. Take a teaspoon of this a day. If you're not feeling well, take a tablespoon or two a day. This is max 35. I also have max 14 and silver solution at different price points and different ppms. If you're having problems with sleeping, please take the Good Night formula. This is tryptophan and melatonin supplement. It'll help you to get into the 3 REM cycles that are very important to consolidate memory, to get rid of toxins, and to get restful sleep. Please get the probiotic that I offer. This one is a powder. I also have a tablet version. Mix the powder with your food or water, and take it every day, and you're going to get your gut properly populated with the right microbes, and you'll improve your absorption and your metabolism. To improve your immune system, please take magnesium and zinc daily. If you're not feeling well, take a double dose of this. It will improve your immune system. And lastly, I have drops and lozenges that are structural nanosilver. So please go to the store and get the Manuka honey silver lozenges in a 21 count. I also have lozenges that are the flavor of elderberry and zinc in a 21 count. These are 60 ppms. So this would be great for the allergy season. We're getting out of the cold season. So now the allergy season is starting because of the pollen. So stock up for your house. I also have drops for honey and lemon and blueberry in a 100 count. So please go to the store and get the drops. These drops and lozenges will help to neutralize pathogens, boost up the immune system, and soothe that sore throat from the allergens.
I've studied the Cultural Revolution, though I'm not a China expert. It never occurred to me when I was working on it, which is quite some years ago now, that a curious kind of cultural revolution light would play out in American universities. I want to emphasize the word light because the treatment of professors and other targets of the Cultural Revolution in China in the late 1960s.
It's important to mention and I said this 4 or 5 years ago when I started noticing it, that on the bulletin board at Harvard, on campus, in Sieber Hall, and on the bulletin boards when you're going through the different gates, the gate by the Science Center is the one that I noticed the most. They post communistic type pamphlets, or sheets of paper, to meet at a certain time for the student body. I suspect that most of the students that are going are undergrads, but there is a communistic tendency on campus at Harvard. I suspect that's similar to other campuses. I did not see that at Fordham. Fordham, though, is a Jesuit school, so there it may have been a little bit more harder to kind of have that thing happen. But I did see it very prevalent at Harvard. I never saw that happen at Wayne State. So I just, something has changed over the decades, and there is this communistic kind of aspect to the student body, and there's intolerance within that movement, and it's not just geared at the professors. It's not just the students going after the professors, or the ultra liberal professors at the university going after the conservative professors, or the professors that are having a counter argument to the liberal agenda. But it's also students attacking students, and trying to drown them out. And again, you see this happening, that if you disagree with someone on X or on some other social media, they will try to drown your tweet, or drown you out, or discredit you, or whatever. So it's this, the society is becoming uncivilized. Even if the people that are doing the drowning out are conservatives, the conservatives at times, at least in the social media, are acting as if they are left wing. If you go so far left wing, you are right wing. And the same thing, if you go so far right wing, you are left wing. So just keep that in mind. The spectrum of left wing and right wing politics is not linear, it's circular. And so if you go far enough, you actually converge to the opposite pole. So, just keep that in mind.
70s was extraordinarily violent and often led to their deaths. But when Nicholas Christakis, my good friend at Yale, was surrounded by a baying mob of students over the preposterous issue of whether Halloween costumes should be allowed or not at that particular house, I thought to myself, it's a struggle session. It's a struggle session. And the most surprising thing of all is that behaviors like this, behaviors such as the writing of letters of denunciation to academic authorities, should have arisen in a free society. Because I was taught, as an undergraduate, that such behaviors only occurred under totalitarian regimes like Stalin's or Mao's. That the writing of the letter of denunciation was a distinctive pathology of the totalitarian era. I could never have imagined that it would become.
I saw this in real time when Stephen Bannon was supporting Trump during the first general election, for his first term. And I actually saw, because I knew people that came from HBS, Harvard Business School, that they were trying to pull Stephen Bannon's Harvard degree from HBS by petitioning the school, the president, saying that, you know, Bannon is some sort of evil guy because he supports Trump. I mean, the orange man bad syndrome went pretty deep at Harvard. I mean, it gets kind of absurd when you have a student body doing a petition and sending it to the president of Harvard, trying to denounce and discredit a fellow alumnus. I mean, I actually saw this happen. So, you know, people need to really wake up that this new cultural revolution that's taking place on campuses, in corporate, this wokeism, this canceled culture, or different terms and different nuances with the terms, but it's a real thing. It's really happening. And, you know, of course, the cow, you know, stated that, you know, the university, you know, shouldn't be, you know, canceling someone's degree because of their particular political persuasion or who they support as a presidential candidate. But the thing is what if a president at Harvard was more in line with the student body at the time? And this was the problem with Claudine Gay, was that she was more in line with canceling someone. She canceled professors that were disproving some of the DEI perspective by Roland Fry. So, you know, this really happened. This is not theoretical.
Praiseworthy behavior amongst the undergraduates of Ivy League colleges in our time. That I did not see coming, and it has forced me to rethink my own theory about free and unfree societies. It appears one does not need a dictator to have the pathologies of a totalitarian society. How can we explain this? That is the great question. And in The Coddling of the American Mind, John Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, who thought more deeply about this than most, advanced the following argument: that a generation, parents and students have arrived at three erroneous propositions about the human condition. What doesn't kill you makes you weaker, the anti-Nietzschean position. Emotional reasoning, always trust your feelings. And life is a battle, a Manichaean struggle between the goodies and the baddies. I don't, much as I respect both authors, I don't buy this any more than I think smartphones are the sole reason for the current state of mental ill health in American society. I want to offer a different explanation for what has happened. I think the problems that we are witnessing are better explained by the political skew amongst faculty, which has grown markedly more pronounced over the past 4 decades. And crucially, the tendency of university leaders and bloated administrative apparatus to not just appease, but encourage our red guards. One must understand at the micro as well as at the macro level institutions and incentives. And there are incentives to persecute. There are institutional mechanisms that encourage the imposition of conformity, that stamp out the dissident. If one reads Bender's trahison des clercs, the treason of the intellectuals, he describes these pathologies in the very different context of the European universities of the interwar period. And I want to suggest to you, as I suggested in an article in the Free Press a month or so ago, that these strange incentives are at work in our time. Now, I'm often told, but Neil, universities have always been left-wing. Harvard has always been dominated by liberals. So it can't be true that there has to be some change. This is a constant, but this isn't right. This is a naive reading, because in fact, the data show quite clearly, there are some extremely interesting works by Mitchell Langbert on this front, that there has been a significant shift to the left in academic life over the last few decades. Langbert's 2018 sample looked at nearly 9,000 tenure-track PhD-holding professors from 51 of the top-ranked liberal arts colleges. And he was able to identify the political registration of nearly 60% of them. He found that 39% of colleges had no Republican professors at all. 78% of departments in the sample had either none or so few as to make no difference. And when he calculated the Democratic to Republican ratio across the sample, he found, excluding the two military colleges, which are the only institutions that are politically balanced, if you exclude West Point and Annapolis, the ratio of Democrats to Republicans is close to 13-1. In my field history, it's 17-1. It's extremely difficult to calculate the ratio in anthropology because there are no Republicans at all, and that makes the ratio impossible to calculate. You can see that there's quite a significant variance here. There really isn't a significant political skew in engineering, chemistry, economics, and in other professional schools. It's 5-1. But when you get into the humanities, classics, 27-1, sociology, 44-1, English, 48-1, you realize that something has changed and not for the better. One of the many paradoxes of our time is that those who talk most about diversity appear to have participated in an extraordinary reduction in at least the ideological diversity of the modern academy. On groups subjects in this way, you can see the same skew. Humanities in particular have become, to an extraordinary extent, politically liberal. Is the tide turning? I know people.
I don't think the tide is turning. You actually saw a couple of articles in Bloomberg and on CNN about peak woke ending right with the resignation of President Claudine Gay, but I don't think so. I think it's actually going in hibernation, but it's going to rear its head again. I see it with some of the guest speakers over at the Harvard Club and the liberal bias, and how the audience, a far majority of the audience, is so liberal leaning. Even with, a lot of the people that are in the audience are older. Some of them are retired. Some of them are just about to retire. And then, sprinkled in are, maybe Gen X, some Gen Xers, and some younger, newly minted alumnus. But I just am shocked on how liberal their leaning is. Instead of individuals actually sitting and listening to the argument. And instead of wearing a liberal or conservative hat, just having a more logical evaluation of the facts. So, I think it might be going in hibernation in some areas, but it's in full force in others. Please help support my work by going and following my protocol. You can get my products on my store. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com, and you can get the products by clicking the link in the description. And when someone does follow the protocol, we all benefit. All right, we all can benefit, not just you, not just helping my work, but by having a society that gets healthier, takes control of their health, then the societal costs for healthcare will go down. All right, and there's many aspects to improving your health. It's about diet and exercise and balancing and challenging your brain, proper nutrition and supplementation. So there's many facets to it. So in terms of the anti-aging protocol for the supplements, the second pillar of the protocol is a strong antioxidant that soaks up free radicals. That's C60. I have it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, and an 8 ounce configuration. I have it in coconut oil and in avocado oil. The reason why it's in an oil is that C60 is lipid soluble. So you take a full dropper of this or a teaspoon of it a day, and it will soak up the free radicals and bring down the cellular stress. In addition, by doing that, you're going to improve the health of the mitochondria. The mitochondria will start to build more energy, more ATP. If you get the B complex supplements that I offer, they'll also enhance the robustness of the mitochondria, because the B vitamins, B1 through 5, are really important for the electron transport chain that's taking place in the mitochondria. So please go to my store and get the C60. It'll soak up those free radicals and slow down the aging of the cell and the tissue. When you do that on a regular basis, there's going to be a compounding effect, and you're going to start seeing improvement in your health, more energy, and you're going to start noticing that you're slowing down the aging process compared to someone that's not doing this. The first pillar was the structural nanosilver liquid that I showed you, which was the Max 35. That's the first pillar, which is to neutralize pathogens. The second pillar is using the C60. The third pillar is taking turmeric and ashwagandha. Turmeric brings down inflammation. Ashwagandha controls the blood glucose levels and reduces that vascular inflammation with high glucose levels. And by doing that protocol, those 3 pillars, every day, you're going to notice your health is improving. Then you add stuff, the B complex, the multivitamins, the probiotic, the magnesium and zinc, the D3, the vitamin C. When you do that on a regular basis and drink filtered water, you're going to be improving your health. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a cure for everything. But the whole idea is to improve your immune system, improve your cellular and tissue health, so you are slowing down the aging process and improving your ability to fight something if you do get some sort of disease or some sort of infection. If you have something that is very problematic, make sure that you go and see your doctor. And this is the reason why I'm recommending to you to listen to the lecture series, the medical lecture series that I do, that you can purchase on my store, to reduce that power imbalance between your doctor and yourself. Because the more knowledge you have, the better healthcare you're going to get. Because you'll be discerning, you'll be able to ask questions, you'll be able to go, doctor, I don't think that's really the best thing for me. Maybe this is, depending on your situation. But knowledge is power, and you taking control of your medical care is going to increase the probability of better outcomes for you and for society. So please go to my store, pay attention to the protocol that I am offering, and the medical lectures that I have in the pulmonology. For $50, you can purchase the pulmonology module, get the download of the PDF files, and see the actual video lectures. You'll get a password after you make your $50 payment, and that unique password will give you access to the classes, and you have access to the classes, unlimited access. So please go to the store, get the pulmonology module, and pay attention to the anti-aging protocol and all the other health supplements and advice. I want to, I'll be doing part 4 of this series with Neil Ferguson's lecture. Probably publish the next video probably on Wednesday. But just, there's a follower, I won't mention his name, but there's been a follower that is trying to, trying to lose some weight. And I'm sure that other followers are having similar difficulty, and they're having struggles. So I will do a video on what my dietary protocol is, all right? And give you a little bit of an understanding of adiponectin and leptin, and and the hippocampus and the signaling, and the adipose tissue, and how long it takes for adipose tissue to actually go through apoptosis, and the yo-yo diets and all the stuff that's going on, and just my particular take on weight loss. I don't really like doing like shows about weight loss because it's a dime a dozen on YouTube, and most of them are bullshit videos. And I just, stayed away from that thing. But this particular person reached out to me, and it reminded me of my brother. He had heart disease and had gained a lot of weight right before his heart attacks, and weight was a contributing factor for his cardiovascular disease. And it's tied to high triglycerides and cholesterol and blood pressure, and so if I can help my followers in some small way by explaining what I do to stay healthy, maybe you can follow my advice and get better. Just before I do that video, though, I probably will do it next week. But before I do that video, there is no quick solution. If you think that there's a quick weight loss solution, it's not going to be quick. And I'll tell you the reason why. It takes 5 to 7 years before adipose tissue goes through apoptosis after they've been deflated from their triglycerides. Adipose tissue holds fats, all right, the triglycerides. So when you're burning fat, what's happening is the triglycerides are leaving the adipose tissue and getting into the bloodstream, and then eventually getting processed for neoglucogenesis. So this is when someone says they're losing weight, they may have lost triglyceride weight, fat, right, and fatty acids, but they have not lost their adipose. The adipose cell is still there. So it's very easy to gain weight again. It takes 5 to 7 years to lose adipose cells. They may be deflated from their triglycerides, but that means that you have to maintain a certain caloric level and activity level for 5 to 7 years to have long-lasting results. I'm willing to bet that most people that hear about weight loss programs and all this, they don't hear that. All right, you don't hear that added really important benefit. So I'll give you some of my perspective on these different plateau problems that people have because of the resetting of the adiponectin and leptin, and you know, a little bit of the biochemistry and what's going on with weight gain and weight loss, and what you need to do. All right, it's not going to be fast. If you think there is something fast, you're going down the wrong. You're going down the wrong solution. It's going to be a yo-yo diet, and potentially get worse. Usually, these individuals that try this fast kind of process, what happens is that when they cycle back up and gain weight, they actually gain more weight than when they started. So there is a way to do it, but it's slow, and it has to be methodical, and you have to be dedicated and realize that faster is not farther. And these quick weight loss ideas usually will lead to further problems down the road where there's weight gain. All right. So I'll do a video that goes in a little bit detail. It's just focused on that. I don't really like doing these kinds of videos because there are a dime a dozen on YouTube, and it's just not my shtick. But this individual reminded me of my brother. I want to, if I can, the medical knowledge that I do have, somehow steer him in the right direction for a better life, a healthier life. So perhaps I can, prevent something that this individual might have later down the road, like a stroke or a heart attack. So, I'll do this video to explain my perspective on this, the biochemistry and what they need to do. But just keep in mind, for the individuals that are looking for some sort of solution to their overweight or obesity, it's not going to be fast. Don't fall into the trap that you think it's going to be fast. But if you do it slow and methodical and you're consistent, then it will be a permanent weight loss. So just keep that in mind. I'll give you further details when I do the video. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.